Hey, it worked.
Hey, we are live on our new platform here at
That's right.
Supply Chain Now.
So good afternoon, everybody. Scott Luton and Greg White with Supply Chain Now. We're testing out a new platform for our LinkedIn Live, and StreamYard is working well, Greg. Well,
as far as we know.
We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
As we walk through 3 topics today for this LinkedIn Live. So, no shortage of difficult circumstances across industry, not just in supply chain, but globally. And we're going to tackle 3 things in this LinkedIn Live. Number one, we are going to talk about COVID-19 and the coronavirus and some of its impact from what we've seen here in recent days. Greg will share some of his observations and insights there. And then, on a much lighter note, we're going to talk about some of the key takeaways from last week, which was MODEX 2020. And thirdly, we're going to talk about our 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards and some of the neat companies and stories that came out of that program. So, while the supply chain industry is taking on the coronavirus and all the challenges that comes with that head on, we all still need the departure from that from time to time. So the last 2 last 2 topics will give us just that. All right, so Greg, as we survey the overall landscape, put our finger on the pulse, between our networks and our guests, and just for that matter, how we've had to evolve what we do.
Yeah.
Give us some things that are sticking out from where you sit.
Well, I think, first of all, I think the thing that stands out the most is how rapidly things are changing. I mean, last week, the theme for MODEX was the show must go on. I think we got about a third of the attendance that they were expecting. But look, this has had a big impact on everyone, and it's changing very, very rapidly. If there's anything that stands out, it's that. This is an enormous global health situation, and it's not something that we've ever been equipped with either the medical technology or the communication technology to be so aware of something like this and be so able to communicate. So, there's the natural hysteria that you have around this sort of thing. There is the very real health threat, and there is the constant change and reevaluation and the constant flow of information around this. So, unfortunately, there's been loss of life. It's relatively, in some countries, it's much worse than others. Italy is a good example of having managed this exceedingly poorly. China has such a huge population, and it's where the virus originated. So they have their cities are so large, they had such a huge exposure. But it's also impacted business, and it continues to. And you can tell that health professionals and governments and companies and individuals are still trying to get their footing with how to manage this. So
2 things as it relates to coronavirus. When we're not here, I am not a trained medical professional and doctor. However, we've all been doing our homework, right? And we don't want to weigh into the debate. Like many things here in the States, this has kind of created 2 camps, and you see it play out across social media. We're not going to weigh into that debate, but I think there are 2 things that the data tells us, right? And in supply chain, we certainly are big fans of data, right? In God we trust, and in all others, bring your data. Number one is that death rates associated, you just spoke to it, death rates associated with COVID-19 do occur at a higher pace than your typical flu. I think those 2 things have been compared excessively throughout the last month, and certainly throughout the last week or 2. That's not the best comparison. I think when I survey the threat that is to the U.S. and the community and the industry, the biggest concern, Greg, seems to be the massive systems threat. So if the coronavirus spreads and is not able to be contained is the strain on the overall healthcare system, and how some very unpopular and unsavory decisions will have to be made by our medical professionals. Is that kind of how you interpret it?
Yeah, well, those decisions are being made every day in many countries, particularly Italy and in Europe, but particularly in Italy. They have a very aged population, and they lack. Look, we are supply chain professionals, right? We provision for spikes, but we don't provision for unprecedented spikes that are orders of magnitude above the typical peaks that you see throughout the season, right? The demand that this is putting on the supply chain, on some items, toilet paper is a good example, is 3 to 5x standard demand. So it is economically and physically impossible to provision for that, because for a country like China, or even just the United States, to provision for a spike in healthcare resources, you'd have to consume a good portion of the world's goods to support things like testing and things like that. That's not to excuse any delays or anything like that. And like you said, I can't really render an opinion on that. But this is an unprecedented spike. And as importantly, this is an unprecedented response, right? We don't have yet unprecedented illness,
Right.
but we have an unprecedented speed and volume of response to this. And that has created some of this spike as well. The spike in the illness is reputedly, again, we'll defer to the experts, but the experts are saying the spike in the illness is yet to come.
Right. And that's speaking of unprecedented, we've seen here just in the last 24 hours how, for the first time since I believe 1938, the federal government has gone and put a hold on the hours of service for certain products, so that the supply chain can act even faster. Now, there's two sides of that coin, and we'll kind of see how that plays out. We love on our truck drivers. They're the backbone supply chain. They move 70% of our country's freight when you consider that by volume. So there's no getting around that. They're absolutely critical. But there's a safety measure there that we've got to take into consideration. So when we take these unprecedented steps, we're entering into some territory that is first time territory for many, if not all.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Look, the impact went from, to give us an example of MODEX, it seems like we have been working from home, and we're in our home studios now, but working from home or preparing to work from home. It seems like we've been doing that for a long time, but MODEX just ended last Thursday.
Right.
And on Friday, because it went from Monday to Thursday, on Friday prior, it was full speed ahead. And then finally on Sunday, I think they recognized that it was going to be a low turnout, and the show did continue, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, our neighbors at MODEX can confirm that we hot-footed it out of there pretty quickly as soon as the show ended. An amazing logistical effort, by the way, by the team.
I think we got a picture somewhere. Well, so again, so much has changed in such a short period of time, both for the supply chain community and many others. But if we can wrap just on, so we can get into the lighter material, MODEX and Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. We have at Supply Chain Now, we have adjusted our approach as we've learned more and have gotten more informed. For the next couple of weeks, all of our interviews that are typically in person are all going remote. This social distancing, which is not, there's some real substance behind that as we look to contain the spread so that our healthcare system does remain viable, and so all healthcare challenges can still be cared for. But to our listeners and to anyone that sees this, take heed. An abundance of caution is a great thing. And, I would much rather be sitting here a year from now looking back that we took a little bit more action than not enough.
Yeah, and I mean, look, let's face it, Scott, for us, this isn't that huge of a change. We do a lot of remote interviews. We love to get in person, get people in studio. The dynamic with particularly a new guest when you're in studio is so much more organic. But, it's not prudent to do that right now. We probably don't feel the pain as much as other people do. I mean, enormous Fortune 500 companies have gone completely work from home. And just if you watch LinkedIn or even just communications that we've gotten from friends in any industry, they spent the weekend or today setting up the ability for them to work from home. So this is an incredible transitionary time for folks right now. And I think we can expect this entire week probably to be a time period of people trying to get their feet under them in terms of being able to work from a new facility, or, work from home, right? And have the equipment to be able to do that.
And again, if it's not mission critical, really hoping everyone kind of reconsiders exactly, what they do and where they go and how they engage in this critical time to get a wrap on the coronavirus here in the U.S. So, again, these next two topics, we want to kind of just touch on that from some of the observations we've had, some of the conversations we've had. Last week was, in many ways, despite the background of the current landscape, Greg, it was also, moving to a much lighter note, it was a great week. We met with some great business leaders that have some very innovative companies that are offering new and bold new solutions in some cases to the market.
Yeah, look, the thing that people talked about over and over again at MODEX was robotics. And I've been thinking about that this week, Scott, and this isn't directly related to MODEX, but consider this, right? The vast majority of the production of many kinds of goods goes through China. And the reason that it goes through China is because there is a wealth, billions, literally billions of workers in China, and therefore the labor rate is very, very low. As we know, production moved to China as early as the 60s and has been moving there dramatically ever since. So to offset that, I think robotics are a great option, because even if we want to, of course, reestablish manufacturing in the States, we don't have the people to be able to provide the volumes that China can provide today. So we can use robotics to augment that, give our workers here in the States more satisfying, less repetitive and dangerous jobs, and start to replace that volume, because what we're also realizing is that we are too dependent on China for production. So I can't say it's going to happen. It's something I'd like to see happen. I think there's a good reason for it to happen, and I think that other companies could see that. And we could start to see manufacturing, even if it's just secondary or tertiary sourcing, coming back to the States, and doing so in an economically feasible fashion that allows us to bring production back. That, to me, that was one of the biggest things that I saw, one of the biggest takeaways from MODEX that I see, in addition to a lot of collaboration among companies. But robotics being the topic of the day just made me think about all the things that we could do to offset the risk of a single source manufacturing system like that.
Yep. And, we spoke a lot with folks at MODEX and companies at MODEX that were applying technology and automation and robotics with the worker in mind and the workforce in mind. Companies like ProGlove has some technology where it's going to allow the worker that man the front lines in many ways to do more and to do it in a safer manner, to do it in where they're going to learn new skill sets. And that's been, it wasn't a part of every conversation we had, right? Because when you do incorporate robotics into a facility, there's going to be some degree of the human workforce that is offset a bit. But for folks, we can't bang this drum enough. For folks that are willing to learn more and do new things and get out of that comfort zone, this is going to present a wonderful opportunity for folks to walk through new doors and find other ways of expanding their careers.
Look, I think we have to quit apologizing for automation. I know we have to quit apologizing for automation. The largest generation in the history of the planet is leaving the workforce at 10,000 per day. We don't now, and we won't in the future, have enough workforce to create the kind of volume of services and capabilities that we have had in the past.
Yep.
So we can quit apologizing, because no one is going to lose their job. I'm not kidding. No one is going to lose their job. And the truth is, these incoming generations, Gen Y and Gen Z, they don't want to do manual labor. So we have to replace it. And that just, to me, enhances the opportunity to claw back some of that manufacturing. And I think the sooner we cease to apologize for automating things, the better we are, because that resistance is unnecessary, it's futile, and it doesn't help us to delay automation because we're afraid to anger a workforce that is largely leaving the workforce today. So, I mean, let's just face it. We're not biting the bullet. Nobody's losing a job. The people who cling to that manual way of doing things are leaving the workforce rapidly, and we have to replace them. A lot of knowledge is going away with them as well, right? Because they just know how to do it. There weren't the procedures in place to capture that knowledge and to educate the next generations, but we can simulate and communicate that to technologies that can then adapt that very, very rapidly and flawlessly.
Without apologizing.
Without apologizing. I really do. I firmly believe that people will not lose their jobs with automation this round. And they haven't in the past. The truth is that their jobs have been elevated, except for John Henry, right? When the steam engine came around, people moved to different jobs. Right. So,
beyond the great keynotes, the Mannings were there. That we heard a lot about them. The networking and the comedy night. We heard a lot about.
Colin Yost. Yeah.
David Schillingford in the Resilience 60 team, the panel they were on, that really addressed some of these coronavirus concerns and risk concerns. Heard a lot about the programming, and then that doesn't even include the folks that we sat down with, the folks like Brad Rufkus with BoxLock, which is doing really cool things.
Really cool last mile solutions. Yep.
Your friend Greg Diego.
Yeah, Diego Pantoja Navajas from Oracle. Lord, his title is so long. Let's just say Oracle Warehouse Management Development, whatever his title was. But talking about how technology has evolved. Right. And then we talked with Hector and Robbie about from SynContext about the human element of getting technologies like that engaged in an organization, and how important it is to have those two fellas in particular had real practical experience, and they brought that to their projects when they when they worked with a client. So that was really valuable. I mean, we saw every angle out there. We talked to people about robotics. We talked to people about AI and IoT and blockchain, all of the typical buzzwords and key phrases. But you know what was hope inspiring there was that we saw practical applications that could be used every day.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, IoT and pallets, right? We talked to Tyson Steffens from the Pallet Alliance. Thank you. One of the best looking booths, by the way, at MODEX. That was a really nice one. And IoT in old wooden pallets.
That's right.
That is meaningful and useful technology today.
Well, going back to robotics, Geek Plus made a big splash. They were turning a bunch of heads at MODEX. We saw reconnected with a few friends from Flexport, which had a really cool booth, by the way.
Yep.
And beyond all of that, of course, we're going to be releasing about 15 interviews in the next week or two. We were also able to sit down with John Paxton and talk about MHI and talk about what lies ahead. So John is the incoming CEO that takes the reins in January 2021. And MHI is doing a lot of great work to serve industry and to develop industry so that we can replace some of that talent and some of that leadership talent that Greg alluded to earlier. Didn't allude to it. He laid it down earlier. We've got to replace that. Even if we're not replacing the sheer working bandwidth, we still have to replace the leadership bandwidth and the innovative bandwidth. We got to compete for talent against all sectors, including the technology sector, which I would argue is supply chain these days. But still, we're competing for the best of the best these days, which wasn't always the case, Greg.
Well, that's something that we saw. We saw a lot of people coming into the industry from other industries. We've seen them come from finance and investment. Venture capital into supply chain, physics, all sorts of industries. And, we talked about supply chain careers, right? So you could literally write a book about it. We didn't, unfortunately, but, we talked about SCM talent and recruiting that is specifically for supply chain, and how many people want to see supply chain as an opportunity finally and want to get into it.
Rodney,
right?
SCM Talent Group.
Yep. Yeah, right. His book.
Yep.
Supply Chain Careers, I think, right? And
it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
About it end of the year, I think.
Yeah.
We're still we'll get an update on that time frame, but
he is talking to people every day who aren't in the industry and who are dying to get in.
That's right.
So you're right. The wealth. It's interesting that in this time when talent is really tight, that the wealth of talent wants to get into supply chain. That's really, really encouraging.
Love it. And then one final really fun conversation we had was with Daniel Studdard, who's with the Atlanta Regional Commission.
Yeah.
The Freight Task Force. If you think freight or transportation is boring, wait till you hear that podcast. Daniel is a resource. I loved hearing he had a history of the infrastructure through Metro Atlanta.
Right.
Some fascinating stuff that keeps things moving. So stay tuned.
I asked him some really intellectual questions, like I always do. Right. And he knew the answer. That's the funny thing.
There wasn't much, Daniel.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so now as we wrap up this brief LinkedIn Live session, we're going to touch on the 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which was held March 10th. They're hosted by MODEX.
Yeah.
Supply Chain now partner with the Metro Atlanta Chamber, Apex Atlanta, and CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable. And what a day! What a day, Greg. What was your to our listeners and to our audience, the winners you'll see in press releases. It's already been hitting the wire earlier today. I saw a piece in DC Velocity. Big thanks to our friends Will Haraway over at Backbeat Marketing for donating his time towards that effort and his expertise. But Greg, if you had to pick one or two moments from the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, those 14 winners, what they shared at the podium, regardless, what was your top highlight or two?
Wow. Well, first of all, Christian Fisher, President and CEO of Georgia Pacific. How timely was that? Right.
Who served as our keynote, of course.
Yeah, he was our keynote speaker, talking about supply chain, talking about paper, talking about the very real. Although, how interesting is this, Scott? 6 days ago on Tuesday, there was no run on toilet paper. Right. I remember specifically Christian saying, and somebody must have heard him saying, "Hey, go get, we want you to buy paper towels and toilet paper." Well, they heard him.
Right.
And they responded. But anyway, a very good speaker, actually really very entertaining and comical, but very, very focused, and a CEO who was deeply aware of the value of supply chain.
Yeah,
To
and
me, that
the value of collaboration in order
right.
to drive and optimize innovation. I think one of the quotes he said almost verbatim is, "We can't do this alone." And gosh, if that's not, we're not today where we were on March 10th. But if those words don't really ring in your ears right now, you might need to check your pulse.
Yeah, and he also, look, we have a collaboration with one of their divisions, Point A, which is a supply chain. It's a supply chain innovation center and incubation center, and he announced that we're going to be advisory members to Point A, and that was a great honor. First of all, for us, to have it announced to the world by the CEO of Georgia Pacific. But also, it's great for us to be able to tell everyone we're going to be working with some of the biggest and smallest companies in supply chain to bring them together in that collaboration to create new solutions for precisely the kind of issues that we face in supply chain today. So it's going to be great to be every single day living in that environment with our second studio to experience that.
Very excited. We're very excited. What a great honor to be able to be creating content in a dedicated space at Point A. It's a gorgeous, they've been building this project out for the last year and some change. Really looking forward to seeing what we can do there. But what from one of my highlights, which is also a current partner where we've been creating content for quite some time, Enrique Alvarez with Vector Global Logistics, was he and AutomationDirect.com are recognized with the World Class Culture Award by
Yep.
Paige Siplon, CEO of Team One Logistics. And in Enrique's comments, which I continue to get a lot of feedback around, he specifically thanked his team for allowing him to be able to work in their company.
Their company. So that company, Vector Global Logistics, they are a changing and improving the world company first, and a logistics company second.
True.
And that sounds cliche and it sounds like lip service, but I can guarantee you it is not. That is, you could tell when Enrique was speaking that is his heart, and he really believes it. He really makes sure that it happens, and he really does appreciate all the people that work with him and all the things that they're doing for the world and for their clients. It's a really amazing company, and they've got offices here in the States, in Mexico, and Chile, and they move containers all over the world. So, look, if only to get a picture for what you ought to be doing as a good corporate citizen to do your part to do better in the world, go take a look at Vector Global Logistics. They literally deliver. Is it 100, Scott? 100 meals for every container that they move. Yeah. Right?
They're making it happen for sure.
It's so simple. It seems so simple when you hear him say it, right? They just made it part of their business model. So that was really valuable.
Oh, it was certainly a highlight. We can't do it justice in a 10-minute segment here on LinkedIn Live, but we should give thanks real quick to the sponsors that help make it happen. Our premier sponsors, Georgia Pacific, the Home Depot, and the best airport in the world, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Beyond that, spend management experts, Work, the Reverse Logistics Association, Buyers Meeting Point, Team One Logistics, Women in Manufacturing, which played a great role, and we had a new award named
Excellence in Diversity.
Yeah, it was all about engaging all folks in leadership efforts. And Elba Pereira Gallagher was recognized for her leadership in making sure all folks can have opportunities, right?
Yep. Show me 50.
Show me 50. That's right. So let me just
just one more thing. So the closing remarks of the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards were exceptional. Scott, you did a fantastic job. I know those were words from your heart.
Mm.
And I know you really appreciate what people are doing in supply chain. You and the team did a great job really pulling that awards show together. Everybody, you're going to get to watch Scott blush, pulling that show together. And there he is. And and running that and making it happen. You take a big part in that. You're not just the showman. You're a hell of a showman, but you're not just the showman. You make it happen, and I really appreciate it as a member of the supply chain community in Atlanta for a lot of years. The elevation of Atlanta as the supply chain city is a long time coming, and the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards are a big part of that. And you know what? It wasn't just Atlanta companies who won awards, right? I mean, all you have to do is do business in Atlanta. So, it's a recognition by the city who drives supply chain to the companies that are creating excellence in supply chain. And I thank you for putting it together. Thank you for putting it on, taking such an active part, and then representing it so well.
I appreciate those words. But most importantly, we love the folks that make it happen in supply chain. We love covering stories. We love talking about the leadership journeys. We love talking and showcasing the companies that are finding new innovative ways of solving new problems, of solving old problems. And really, the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards isn't just an extension of all of that. And so to hear all those leaders come through and share remarks on why they received certain recognition, that is worth the price of admission times 10. And next year we're only going bigger and better. So I appreciate your words there. And if I can, that award, the official name of that award was escaping me a few minutes ago. The 2020 Inclusive Leadership Excellence Award.
There you go.
Winner. Elba.
That's Elba.
That's right. Elba Proud Gallagher, Show Me 50. You can learn more. Listeners can learn more at showme50.org. Really appreciate what she's doing.
Yep.
To make sure everyone's included. No one's left behind. There's opportunities for all to progress throughout their career in industry. So with that said, I would say to our audience, and I've got two things, and Greg, I want to get your two things here. So thing number one, most importantly, please take heed and prepare, and don't, and one thing we didn't talk about is don't buy into the panic. Buy what you need, get what you need, use what you need, but help the supply chain do what it does best, right? Replenish itself. Don't hoard products. I think it's really important for consumers to know that they play a very critical, active role in managing supply chains, right? Mm-hmm. So that's number one. Number two, on a much lighter note, hey, stay tuned for all this content, all the interviews that we created last week at MODEX and as part of the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. What a great week in terms of getting stories and content from those that are making it happen. And you can learn all of that or find out a lot more at supplychainnowradio.com. Greg, what's your two things as we close this LinkedIn Live?
Take care of the world by taking care of you. Do those things that keep you healthy will help you keep the rest of the world healthy. That's one. And number two is take advantage of this opportunity to see Scott in colorless shirts while we work from home. I may be able to keep him in a T-shirt for a week or two while we do this. And I like it. You're repping the T-shirt game pretty well, man.
Hey, we're trying. We got to give a little bit of credit to
There you go,
Robertson, who sent along a C-130 Hercules shirt. We're big fans of aviation, aerospace, certainly of Lockheed Martin and what they do here in Supply Chain City. So with that, Greg, I think that's a wrap for this episode of LinkedIn Live, our first using StreamYard. So kudos to the folks that made this far easier for us. And
Clay Phillips for one.
Sorry, Clay. High five to Clay.
Yeah.
Phillips. Really appreciate what you do to drive Supply Chain Now. And to our audience, again, check us out at supplychainnowradio.com and Let us hear from you. Give us
Yeah.
your feedback. Give us your story ideas and tell us what you're experiencing. That's the lifeblood of our business. So thanks everybody on behalf of Scott Luton and Greg White. Stay safe, stay home, and this too shall pass. We'll get through it all together. Thanks everybody.